Live from the world headquarters of Pro Cannabis Media in Clinton, Massachusetts, it's Green Rush Live. Hi, everybody. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young. I'm the sometimes regular host on Green Rush Live every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. We have a business of cannabis talk show. We get some great guests. We have some great conversations. And then, of course, at 6 o'clock, 2 hours from now, we run our We Talk News show, which is really a comprehensive but short and sweet roundup of all the cannabis news from coast to coast. And that comes up at 6 o'clock. It's anchored by Elena Pinto. And I recommend hanging out or at least watching it on demand once a week, because you will definitely learn something about what is going on in the world of the cannabis industry in the United States. And not only the United States, but in the second half hour, we're going to head over, they say, cross the pond over to Europe and talk a little bit with two guys that live in Europe, and we'll be sharing some of their experiences and a preview of a expo in Dortmund, Germany in September. And I told him, I said, I'd love to go, but unless you fly me out there, it's not going to happen. I only go to shows that I can drive to. Now, joining me for this half hour are two people. One is Andrew Berenger. He's our regular DC and Maryland correspondent on We Talk News. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And Rachelle Gordon. She is the editor of greenstate.com. Rachelle has been a writer of cannabis for many years and has written for many of the big publications or digital platforms, however you look at Cannabis Now and High Times and Skunk. There was a few others, but Rachelle Gordon, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us what's going on with Green State and how you ended up with them.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I started my journey with Green State earlier this year. I took over at the helm in late March, and it was actually a very interesting journey. I met a couple of people who work for the organization in Vegas at the Clio Awards last year, and they said, hey, this website is looking for an editor. You should really do it. I didn't really think much of it at the time, but I had manifested for myself wanting to speak to a more mainstream audience. And that's really what we do. We're more of a B2C focused publication. We're really focused on the Canna Curious, especially, and even the Canna Curious adjacent, people who could just benefit from some really great information about cannabis.
And by the way, if 20% of Americans use cannabis on a daily basis, I think that's the last percentage that I heard. That means that the enlightenment has to happen to a whole bunch more people. And Aaron Smith, I always tell this story, the executive director of the NCIA, I was at one of his events, and he said, everybody who's in the industry has the obligation to educate those people that have no idea about cannabis. It's the only way we will combat the stigma. Andrew, down in the DC, Maryland area, there's a lot of excitement right now because Maryland is open for business and they're doing great. We will get immediately into Minnesota, but I want just to give an update a little bit on what is going on in Maryland right now and how has it been going so far with the adult use market?
You can hear me and hopefully can see me. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just continue. Maryland you are correct. The sales for Maryland just came in for its first legal month of adult use. And the numbers have shown that it made it sold $87 million in 1 month, which equated to about $2.8 million a day. And then they broke down it was about almost 20,000 pounds or 10 tons of cannabis was sold in the month of August, and $4.6 million came from just tax revenue, like new money for the economy. And I actually just found this stat out, Jimmy, which is, well, two of them. This last election, the midterms, there were 5 states on the ballot that had cannabis on the ballot to pass for adult use. Maryland was one of them. Missouri was another, and North Dakota, South Dakota, and another one. Missouri and Maryland were the only 2 that passed.
Well, actually, I think one of the Dakotas passed, and then the governor nixed it. I think it's South Dakota. Rachelle, am I right?
Something like that. Yeah, it was.
Okay,
Yeah, to say
all right.
the least. So, but look, if you look at Missouri and Maryland, they both have the same exact population, 6.1 million people. And voter initiative pushed through. They both, you want to guess what Missouri got on their first month of sales? $91 million in sales.
Yeah, we have a very popular Missouri cannabis report by Brandon Jones.
Oh, he's a great guy. And then full circle with passing of Minnesota. Thank you, Minnesota. Now officially more than 50% of the US population lives in a state that is a legal cannabis state. That is amazing.
So
Awesome.
On behalf of the state of Minnesota, which is where Rachelle is, first of all, congratulations. And I got to tell you, Andrew, it was great. You made perfect sense. I heard you perfectly, and you never had to move your lips. It was outstanding how that happened.
I've been practicing all night, actually, on that. So
you've got a future in ventriloquism. All right, let's talk about Minnesota. Rachelle, you wrote a great article this week that I immediately jumped on and read every single word of it. And I'm just going to start at the headline because there are actually, it's a headline and a sub-headline. I think that's how you say it. But I'm going to say you have 5 ways Minnesota's legalization could be a national model. And before that, you said automatic expungement and no fake weed. Those were 2 big issues. Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, the automatic expungement, because that continues to rear its ugly head, even in legal states right now. The battle to get the people that are in jail for cannabis crimes, possession, even minor sales, out of jail. And of course, that's why the Last Prisoner Project exists too. So walk us through how was the battle? You covered the battle. So, I mean, you saw the debates going on, I'm guessing, on all these subjects.
Yeah, it was a really interesting thing to see play out because we don't have a ballot initiative for these sorts of things in Minnesota. It had to go through the legislature. And so there were dozens of committee hearings, lots and lots and lots of debate. But the social justice and social equity components were really, really important to the legislators. And the automatic expungement is incredible. I believe around 66,000 Minnesotans will benefit initially from the automatic expungement of lower level criminal offenses. And it could take up to a year for Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to go ahead and clear that log. For people with felonies on their record, there's going to be a panel set up. So on a case-by-case basis, they can take a look at those felony convictions and hopefully expunge them, especially for ones that are completely legal right now. So right now you can have up to 2 pounds of cannabis in your home, whereas before that was a 5th or 4th degree felony possession charge. Wow.
Well, obviously they've done a great job there. Do they recognize they really want to be a national model because they seem to be trying to get it right? I love the fact that Minnesota was the first state, I believe, to not allow towns and cities to opt out of allowing cannabis stores in their domains, in their areas. That was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in the debates, the local control was something that the cities really wanted, right? They wanted to be able to ban these, but they actually can't. They can set a limit on 1 retail dispensary for every 12,500 residents. If they would like to, but they can't outright ban them, which is really exciting. Now, some are passing moratoriums, no new cannabis businesses for a year so they can examine it. And same thing with the public consumption, because actually this bill does not criminalize public consumption. So in many cities, you can go and smoke a joint on the street and it's completely legal. But many cities now are trying to pass ordinances where, no, you may not smoke marijuana on city property. So that's been a little bit of a hiccup, especially for people who may rent their homes. There's a provision in the bill about banning cannabis consumption in multi-family dwellings. However, it is kind of up to the landlords to decide what the policy is there.
I love it when legislators try to figure out ways to limit where the product can be consumed in the public. This is not an issue in New York City. If you walk down New York City, Andrew knows, as do I. But think about this for a second, people, okay? This is a product that for the last 86 years, the people who've been using it have been sneaking around in the alleys and going behind back doors. We know how to get it done. Okay, let's just say it's been practiced for years. That being said, now that there's legalization or at least decriminalization or more acceptance, I'm all about getting to normalization, which is the acceptance of the fact that this plant medicine is here to stay. And it's going to be a fascinating journey. It already has been in each state. Every state has different rules. Every state has different where they are in the process. And Minnesota being a new one is fascinating. I want to jump right ahead. And I know Andrew's back now, and I do think he's actually. Yeah, yes, we have him moving. Andrew, if you have a question about Minnesota, you go to Rachelle first. Go ahead.
I just want to know, I didn't know what I missed. It's for some reason, whenever I come and join you on the show, it's always an update that is needed to install like right in the middle of the show. Did we talk about the tribes yet?
No, perfect.
Oh, okay. So first of all, with Minnesota being 23rd state, thank you so much. I mean, and there's obviously, like Jimmy was saying, every state does it differently, but every state can learn and do better from other states. And you look at Minnesota, and yeah, we legalized cannabis. You guys legalized cannabis, but I believe, just correct me, Rachelle, if I'm wrong, but the licenses don't go out for adult use dispensaries and companies for like another year plus, right?
Correct.
And yeah, and so for then the ability for Native American tribes in that state to be like, you know what, we're going to start selling legal cannabis because we can way earlier than what they've already set up is just, I mean, I don't have words of how amazing that really is, because like I said, I don't have words, and I'm very, very seldomly at a loss of words. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see. And I know that our Governor Walz was really adamant in the lobbying process that we are going to give Indigenous tribes a head start on this industry. And one thing that has been made really, really clear in the whole debate, the passing of this bill, is that we want to be Minnesota first, right? We want to protect craft. We want to keep it in the state and support our communities. Now, two Native American tribes have already started selling cannabis. On day one, we had Red Lake Nation. They had a native care dispensary on their tribal land, and non-tribal members are able to come and purchase cannabis there. People stood in line for hours. They actually had to close early because they were so overwhelmed with demand. And then 2 days later, White Earth Nation also opened their first dispensary. And actually, the tribes are working together to see if they can make a deal with the state to also open some native-run dispensaries outside of the reservation, which could be very, very interesting.
Very interesting and set up for legal lawsuits and all that neat stuff too. But I'm all for that, by the way. And isn't it? It's very interesting. I think we all are comfortable talking about the role that race has played in cannabis in history here. That Black people or people of color, whether they be from brown or black, is what they like to say now, and I'm all for that. But the indigenous people were here first, right? The Native Americans were here first, and the old white man comes over to this country, and we hang out with them. We pass the peace pipe around, have a great Thanksgiving meal with them, and then we decide to slaughter them, put them in cages, and treat them like crap. Okay, because that's how the United States of America has treated the people that were here first. Now, you can get on me, bleeding heart liberal, whatever you want to call me. I don't like names. I don't like labels. And notice I didn't even ask Rachelle if the governor was an R or a D. I don't want to know, because he's pro-cannabis. That's the only party I care about right now. It really is. I am a one issue voter. So Rachelle, one of the things that I, again, give credit to Minnesota is you're embracing home grow. You're allowing the people. Walk us through the regulations there, and maybe people from New Jersey who are watching this might get an idea that maybe we should be doing that too.
Well, what I can say is that the people in Minnesota are really excited about the home grow. The response has been overwhelming. They're already offering home grow classes. They're selling out. People are packing it at standing room only. So at this point, you can have up to 8 plants in your home, 4 of which can be flowering at any given time. If you want to grow outside, you do have to have a locked structure, so a greenhouse with a padlock on it, if anything, to make sure that we can deter any sort of crime. It's not necessarily about the smell or if the neighbors see the plant, it's just making sure that the plant doesn't get into the wrong hands, period. People are already selling seeds. They're very, very excited about that. Now, there was some confusion about the sale of clones. It's my understanding, based on the regulation and the lawmakers that I've spoken with, that the sales of clones are illegal. You may have heard that yesterday, I believe, a store in Faribault, Minnesota, had a raid. They were selling plants in the parking lot of a smoke shop, and the police came and they confiscated the plants. And so there's definitely been some confusion about, can we sell clones? Can we not? It's my understanding that that's not legal. You need to start from seed.
There you go. And Andrew, one of the most interesting developments that I've learned is seeds are genetics, right? Yep. Genetics. They call them genetics. And as soon as I heard that word, I knew it was a science term, and I went right over my head. And I have a black thumb. I'm not allowed to grow anything because I think I'll just kill it, which I don't want that responsibility for a living thing. Andrew, is Maryland home grow happy or not?
Okay, so Jimmy, that's a loaded question. I appreciate asking that. And Rachelle, the information you have on home grow, 8 plants, that's absolutely amazing. And here in Maryland, when the policy was being rolled out, one of my biggest things I was fighting for, that I submitted amendments for in our own legislation and policy, was a specific license for like a nursery license. So a company could open up and have a storefront with clones, seeds, everything in between. And the reason is behind that is that it's still illegal even to transport cannabis seeds across state lines, unfortunately, if it has a certain THC percentage in it. It is true. It's crazy.
And yet, how are they going to enforce that?
Jimmy, that's a whole different conversation.
It's just not worth it to me. It's like, really, how much time are we going to spend on that one, right?
They call it actually immaculate conception. They pulled it from the Bible, of just like, it just showed up and we're just going to let it happen. But back to Maryland, when the bill was getting ready, there was a lot of fight for obvious home grow because obvious reasons. But the legislators were like this close to not including home grow, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And finally, the bill, when it was done, allowed 2 plants a person, 4 max if there's 2 people in it. And people were very upset. And I had to explain to them, you know what? 2 is a better number than 0. Because if you have 0, that's a lot harder to change than 2. You can
ask New Jersey.
Yeah.
They're still working on it, right?
I mean, even New York has home grow. I mean, it's not, and I do enjoy that the New York policy includes, it's not a plant limit, it's a weight limit. You're allowed to grow up to 5 pounds of cannabis plant, but they don't tell you, if they come and look at it, that includes the pots, that includes the soil, that includes the water. So, but I mean, hey, I don't know how to equate 5 pounds of plants, but also you can do that anywhere in New York, like anywhere. That's amazing.
And yet New York's a mess. Okay, let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, once again, that's a whole different conversation.
New York is a complete mess. They too thought they had it right, by the way. I remember going forward, I think it was Senator Schumer, we got it right. I'm like, I don't know about that.
On paper, it sounded really good.
Right.
It looked good. It sounded good. And then they rolled it out and it was just not done well. And that's what other states need to look at, really.
Yeah. Another thing that I'm going to give Minnesota credit for, the above board gifting clause that's in here, right? I can gift Rachelle 2 ounces of cannabis, up to 2 ounces, right? and
Mhm.
that it's a gift. Now, they did outlaw the workaround that many of these new states have. They call it a gray area, where you buy a T-shirt for like $50, and then you
Like,
get a gift of a half an ounce.
that's
Get it?
DC. Yeah, that's DC.
That's
DC is not
DC.
technically legal. It's gray, exactly like that.
Yep.
Aren't we proud of our nation's cap? No, I'm not. Let's not go there. I do not want to talk about politics. It just gets me riled up, and everybody half
love
the
it,
people
so.
hate me. So I don't want that. Okay. It doesn't matter which half, by the way. Cash or tray may not be exchanged, unlike in DC. So that's good. What missed, Rachelle, in Minnesota? What did they want and they didn't get?
So actually, there has been, with the fake weed situation, there was a little bit of confusion about other cannabinoids that actually are not synthesized, such as CBN, right? They actually outlawed CBN in that, and there was some confusion. And so they understand now that they have to kind of go back. We're calling it the full spectrum push, right? Because obviously these HHCs, the THCPs, right? We all know that that's garbage, but there's a lot of benefits that people can get from a compound like CBN. So that is something that they're going to have to go back and fix, right, to ensure that the pure cannabinoids are able to be sold, and then the fake weed is pushed to the side.
Right. Is Delta 8 illegal in Minnesota?
It is not.
Yeah, and by the way, they're just now getting around to actually putting regulations in place for the hemp world. And then they want to limit the THC percentage in hemp. And I'm like, wait a second, the definition of hemp has a limit of THC to it. So I really get frustrated when you see the people that make up the rules have no clue on what the rules will do. I mean, I'm sure they're going through the motions, but did they do any of the research? There's so many studies and research out there now about the impacts of the different cannabinoids. And, you mentioned CBN. By the way, I take CBN every single night so I can sleep through the night. And everybody, well, what's CBN? I've heard of CBD. And I'm like, man, the public needs to be educated. How frustrating is it for us in the community and in the media world, talking to people, that you can't create a public service announcement and get it played on a traditional television or radio station. By the way, they're available here. If you'd like to send us one, we'll run them.
Before you
Go ahead,
answer,
Andrew, go ahead.
If you have a political party through the FEC created for the cannabis people, like I did with the United Empowerment Party, you can actually do PSAs that are not against the law. I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, cool. By the way, humans are great at looking at the law and then finding a little loophole.
I love loopholes.
Right? And it's a workaround. And that's the beauty. I love the fact that Minnesota is a new state with all these great new policies. Because I want to see when the novelty wears off, because that's why you've got lines around the corner at the different reservations. What happens when 2, 3, 4, 40, 50, 60 dispensaries open up in the state? Then it's a retail game. Then it is normal. Then there is competition, if you will, among stores and what have you. So that's going to be interesting unto itself. What would you like to see happen next in Minnesota? By the way, private parties are okay?
Yes. We can do that. We have like the on-site consumption. You can do that. Like, that's great. We have the event licenses that'll be coming out. I guess what I'm looking forward to is just seeing how the regulations and the licensing, the applications roll out. It will be a scored application, and I know that there's going to be a big emphasis on social equity. So I'm very interested in seeing what those will actually look like, as well as the rollout of, I think some media outlets are calling them reparations, if you will. They're taking money from the sales of the cannabis and putting them into a fund to create grants for communities that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. So it'll be really interesting to see how that portion plays out as well.
I'm going to read you a chat because it pertains to what we were talking about the total weight. We have a caller. I told you I'm an old school guy.
Caller on line 4.
Yeah.
Caller on line 4.
My old world. The guy, I'm trying to see what his name is. I can't, but it's basically 1 gallon of water weighs 1.1 pounds. So thank you. By the way,
it's 11
thank you.
pounds, yeah.
Thank you, the
Thank you,
voice
Dan.
behind the curtain, Dan, because I can't
Wonderful
see it.
Oz.
It's literally this big, and you guys are that big, but at 11 pounds. Okay. So, but the thing about, you have to water the plant, and the idea is the plant absorbs the water, hopefully before it gets weighed.
Well, Jimmy, don't forget about hydroponics. Hydroponics is a whole separate way of growing plants without soil, and it's all water.
Right. And we have hydroponics from Missouri coming on in the last half hour with us, Michael Camp, and we'll talk about that too. In Missouri, by the way, they're allowing public consumption at, single day events outside. They're having festivals now. I mean, they're getting it. They're trying to get it right, and their sales keep going up and up and up. So somebody's doing right. But how are we going to educate the masses of people that still are living in reefer madness world? How do we do it, guys? And without being on mass media, because I don't know if everybody understands this, that everybody's cut the cord at this point, which is kind of funny, cut the cable, right? And over-the-air television, over-the-air radio still exists, but nobody uses it. So my question is, how do we get old school media outlets to embrace the fact that if you're going to do a negative story, like a kid gets into an edible because it wasn't properly stored by the parent or by the adult in the room and ends up in the emergency room, and he's, 6 hours later, he's fine. But we don't want that. We want to educate people about the importance and the responsibility, if you will, of using this plant medicine. It's something I preach all the time. How are we ever going to do this with the naysayers out there? Andrew, real quick, because I
want Rachelle to go first, because my answer is not as fun. So
okay, go ahead, Rachelle. By the way, you can anchor next week too if you want. I don't care. Go ahead, Rachelle.
So, that's where I think outlets like mine come into play, right? And we actually syndicate a lot of our content on more mainstream newspapers. And so hopefully people can see there is a counterbalance, because clearly there is still prohibitionist policies and ideas out there that are being run in the mass media. I can't stand it when I see those stories about the edibles sickening people. It's awful. But hopefully more good stories can continue to come out. And I think the word of mouth is also important. Like when I first got into this space many years ago, people in my extended family thought I was nuts. They were like, you're obsessed with marijuana. You're never going to amount to anything. Marijuana is bad, ... right? Then years later, same people call me. They say, hey, what do you know about the CBD? I have a friend and she says she feels 20 years younger because she's taking this CBD oil. So sometimes it takes that personal connection before it actually, makes sense for people. And so I think we just have to keep plugging away and being good stewards of the plant and having those conversations in our communities as well as the broader media.
Right. And I really, this sounds horrible, I know, but there's one party in particular that is adamant about it being a prohibitionist. And as much as I hate saying this, if one of their children, relatives, grandchild comes down with something and it's fixed, not just handled, it's fixed through the use of cannabis, don't you think they'll soften up their stance on this? Go ahead, Andrew.
I'll wrap it up real quick because I know we're about to switch the window. I actually spoke with a legislator once where he told me that it was cannabis' fault because it was a gateway drug because his niece died of an overdose of opioids. Yeah, I know, right? And
did she drink coffee too, by the way?
Maybe.
Go ahead.
But to finish on the fun part of how do we get education, you mandate it in the policy where there's no other option. You force it upon it. You don't give it up to the option to choose. You mandate it.
Right. And if it's mandated, it should be in school curriculums because everybody's concerned about the kids. What about the kids? What about the kids? And Rachelle, you set it up perfectly. They're going to learn from their peers. And if their peers are reflecting what their parents believe, they're going to get either misinformation or not the right information, which is why I continuously say, if you give the kids an opportunity, they'll blow you away with their maturity and their ability. Stop saying you can't do this to children. Why do you think how do they think they understand what hot is? When mommy or daddy says, don't touch that stove, it's hot. What does a child do? They touch the stove to see what heat feels like because they're curious. That is what goes on as a child. Your parents set boundaries and parameters for us. And the child's job is to push up against those boundaries and parameters to see what they can get away with or actually do, and then say, hey, I did that and nothing happened, or whatever it is. But this is the battle that we're going to be facing now moving forward, because I happen to know that in one of these cities or towns in Massachusetts, health class, the one day during the semester that the health teacher will address cannabis, it's all about the dangers, as opposed to someone in class who may have said, oh, I don't know about you guys, but my seizures have been cured because I've taken cannabis in a work. And look, oh, that's right. I forgot to point out the fact that Andrew has epilepsy, and that, and you've had it since as a kid, right, Andrew?
8 years old. It saves my life every day. And it's that's why I do what I do, is to point out to the legislators that this is a saving. It's not a drug. It's a medicine. It saves people's lives. And if you need education, you mandate it, because then it can be funded by the government with the new money of cannabis. And then we can continue knowledge, because knowledge is power, especially in this industry. It gets a little tricky sometimes.
Absolutely. Andrew Berenger and Rachelle Gordon. By the way, guys, you know this about me. I could talk to you for more than another hour, 2 hours. There's so many elements in this industry that we really didn't touch upon, but I do appreciate you both taking the time. Rachelle, we're going to be in touch with you, because I want to figure out a way to get you to be our Minnesota correspondent. It won't be that big a deal. And when you see the quality of the work that we do on We Talk News and the voice behind the curtain Dan does, putting it all together, I think you'll be proud to talk with us about that. But no pressure on that. Greenstate.com is where you can read Rachelle's stuff and other stuff. You could check it out.